Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Angela.
And I'm Wesley.
Today is 7-11.
7月11日.
And we're talking about not convenience stores, but we're talking about something very interesting. The Rosetta Stone, which was a key to unlocking the secrets of ancient Egyptian scripts.
我们的中文标题是罗塞塔石碑，破译古埃及文字的关键。
So, the interesting thing about the Rosetta Stone is that in and of itself, as an object, it is deeply boring. What it was, no, seriously, there was an empire.
Yeah.
They said, we need to tell people these things, and we need to tell them this regulation in 3 different languages, and they needed everybody in the empire to know this. So they carved a bunch of these stones and put it on street corners everywhere. It was like the public notice of its time. But instead of being paint on a metal sign, it was carved into a stone. The reason why the Rosetta Stone is super valuable to us is that we had never seen 3 identical texts in 3 separate languages before. And we had been desperately trying to understand one of these languages, which we couldn't read at all. But since there was 2 other languages that said the exact same thing, we're like, the chances of the third one saying the exact same thing are extremely high. Let's use it. And so the Rosetta Stone became a symbol of translation.
好，所以刚刚这个 Angela 老师已经把我们今天这篇文章的要旨跟各位讲了。好，那个 Rosetta Stone 它其实就是一块石碑而已，它上面的文字其实是很无聊，它就是一个皇家的法令啊。我们文章里面有讲到 a royal decree， 但是呢，它是用3种语言不同的语言写成的，所以对于这个考古学家、对于语言学家来讲，这是非常重要，因为我们就可以根据这3个语言，我们就可以猜出来其中一种大家都不懂的语言，它大概它的文法、它的文字是什么意思啊？所以这对于考古啊，对于语言学啊，都有很重大的意义。
So let's read, I just basically told you what the article said, but let's read the article's version of his story. In archaeology, some stones are considered valuable due to their cultural or historical significance. The Rosetta Stone, an ancient slab of rock inscribed with passages written in 3 languages, is a great example. From the bottom to the top of the stone are ancient Greek, Egyptian Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. Demotic is a written script used for everyday purposes, while hieroglyphics are symbols that were mainly used by priests to document important religious and historical events. The Rosetta Stone dates back to 196 BC. It contains 3 versions of the same text, which is a royal decree ordered by a council of priests for Ptolemy V, who had recently become pharaoh of Egypt at the tender age of 13. Simply put, the text states that the priests of Egypt supported the pharaoh and declared him to be a devout and generous ruler. After the rule of the pharaohs in Egypt ended in 30 BC, the Rosetta Stone became lost to history. It was not until July 1799 that it was uncovered by the French army during Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign. The stone was named the Rosetta Stone because it was found in a city called Rosetta, which lies about 65 kilometers northeast of Alexandria. Since the 3 scripts are of identical meaning, the stone became a key to unveiling the mysterious Egyptian writing systems. Between 1822 and 1824, French linguist Jean-François Champollion studied the stone and discovered that Egyptian hieroglyphics were not just images carrying meaning, but also symbols representing specific sounds. This discovery enabled Champollion to develop a complete phonetic system for hieroglyphics, which provided future researchers with the tools to unlock this ancient script. The Rosetta Stone is now stored in the British Museum in London. If you are ever interested in solving the riddle of ancient Egyptian scripts, the historic slab is well worth a view. I mean, I've seen pictures of this. I have never been to London, but I've seen pictures of this stone. It is gigantic. It is this massive cube of stone. And part of the problem for the translators is that a whole section of it is broken off. So the thing is, they knew Demotic and they knew Ancient Greek, sort of, both of them. And they used it to figure out hieroglyphics. And the fact that hieroglyphics were not just a symbolic language, but also actually representing sound was the big deal. And that was the coolest thing. But it's funny that, some dumb imperial announcement about, we have a new emperor, he's great, bam. Like this thing, this random sort of useless to most people in their daily lives stone, useless to everybody, suddenly became super useful later on. So it makes me, sometimes I look at like food, how food containers now are printed in like 6 different languages because they're sold internationally.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like boxes and things. I'm like, this could be the future Rosetta Stone for some alien studying art. You know what I mean? They find this random food box that didn't deteriorate in a pile of garbage and they're like, oh, now we know how to speak blah, 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 blah. At least we can talk about food in this language.
Yeah. 好，所以这一块这个罗塞塔石碑呢，它上面的3种文字是古希腊文，还有古埃及的世俗体，还有古埃及的象形文字。好，所以他们这个古希腊文大家已经看了，大概差不多看得懂了。那这个古埃及的世俗体也不是那么难。好，所以他们利用这2个语言去破解这个古埃及象形文字。那就像刚刚这个文章讲到的，最重要的一个发现就是他们发现古埃及象形文字不只是象形，他们还有声音系统在里面。那刚刚这个 Angel 老师有提到说，现在很多东西食品的包装啊，或者是这个食物容器的包装上面都有各种文字的说明啊，因为它可能会卖到不同的国家。那说不定未来这些东西也会成为类似罗塞塔石碑这样的东西，以后的人就可以用这些东西来研究一下啊，所以这不同的文字、不同的语言是怎么写。
Yeah, or like technical manuals or like furniture building instructions, or, all of these things.
各种各样的说明书有不同的语言，大家都可以拿来对照。
Yeah. Okay, so our article says, in archaeology is the study of old things, basically. How did people in the past live based on their physical objects that remain until now? So in this study, some stones are considered valuable due to their cultural or historical significance. So it may be a giant lump of stone to you, but to me, it might mean something very, very important.
好，所以 archaeology 就是考古学。好，所以在考古学上面呢，这个有一些石头呢 are considered 被认为是怎么样呢 ？valuable 就是它的补语，被认为是很有价值的 valuable。Due to 是因为什么被认为很有价值呢？因为他们的文化上面 cultural 或者是 historical 或者是历史上面的 significance 就是重大的意义。所以因为文化历史上有重大意义，所以有一些石头呢被认为是有很大的价值。
The Rosetta Stone, an ancient slab of rock. A slab is a big, roughly flat thing. But when you say a slab of rock, you also think, oh, it's going to be big and heavy. It's not like a tiny sliver of rock or a small piece of rock. It's a slab. Like we put slabs of wood and turn them into tabletops. You can see it's like a giant flat piece of something. So this ancient slab of rock was inscribed with passages. If something is inscribed, it means that it was cut into. It wasn't just written on top. It means that literally the physical surface was cut into to leave these marks or these language pieces. So inscribed with passages. Passages is not as long as an article and not as short as a sentence. That's why when we go to listening tests, they say, please listen to the passage. A passage is a short section of writing, which is not necessarily a complete set of writing. Like an article has an introduction and information and a conclusion. But a passage might just be one piece of an article. So a passage is basically a section of writing. And so there's passages written in 3 languages. And it is a great example of a slab of stone being valuable, super valuable.
Yeah, 好，所以这个罗塞塔石碑呢，那后面一个同位语哈，它是逗点之后讲说它是一个 ancient 古代的 slab of rock。这个 slab 就是石头啊，或者木头或者金属等等一片的东西，或者像板状的东西，那感觉是蛮大的一片。那它是一个很古老的石块。上面其实就是个石碑了哈，那 inscribed with 就是铭刻了，上面刻了什么东西。好，那 inscribe 这个字呢，它的字根我们在杂志的第30页有解释，大家可以看一下，顺便把其他跟这个 scribe 有关的字一起背起来。inscribed with 就是它被 inscribed， 用什么去 inscribe 呢？就是用 with 这个介系词，它用 passages， 也就是一段一段的文字。那这些文字呢是 written in 3 languages， 它是用3种语言写的文字哈，所以 它上面刻用什么来刻呢？刻了一段一段用3种语言写的文字。那这样的一个石头呢 is a great example， 是一个很棒的例子，就是说很有价值的石头，因为它有文化跟历史上面的 significance 啊，所以这是个例子。
From the bottom to the top of the stone, so there's 3 sections, 3 passages, and from the bottom to the top it is ancient Greek, Egyptian Demotic, and on the top, Egyptian hieroglyphics. The reason why the hieroglyphics are on the top is that was the formal, most high-end language you could use. It was the most important language to the people doing the stone. And then they're like, okay, for you people who can't read hieroglyphics, here is the common language version. And then for you foreigners and weirdos, the Greek. Just to make sure everybody really, really knows this. But you all should be able to read hieroglyphics. If this was Chinese, it would be like classical Chinese on top. And then what's the word, the Chinese for everyday people? 白文 or something like that.
白话文.
白话文. It would be 白话文 on the second level and then maybe like English on the bottom. Just so that everybody really understood.
Yeah, 好，所以他这个地方讲说，从底往上呢，是最底下是古希腊文，然后呢是古埃及的世俗体。这个 demotic 就是通俗的、大众的。其实这个 DEMO 就是 people 的意思啊，所以我们讲 democracy。Oh yeah. DEMO 人 people， 那 cracy 就是 rule 统治，所以是由人民来统治，那个叫做民主 democracy。好，那这个 demotic 就是通俗的一种世俗体。好，然后最上面的是古埃及的象形文字。为什么古埃及象形文字放最上面呢？因为这个应该是最重要的一个语言，所以刚 Angel 他举那例子蛮好玩的哈，就是如果是现代的话，可能中文最上面可能是这个文言文，然后呢中间可能是白话文，就是所谓的世俗体，那最下面呢是一个世界通用的语言，现在的话大概就是英文，所以这个石碑上面3个文字是这样排列的。
Now, the text here explains Demotic. It says, Demotic is a written script used for everyday purposes, while hieroglyphics are symbols that were mainly used by priests to document important religious and historical events. So hieroglyphics was like the formal, symbolic language of power, and then Demotic was what everyone used every day to speak.
好，所以 Demotic 它就解释一下什么叫古埃及世俗体呢？它是一种 written 就书写的 script 书写的一种语言啊，一种文字哈。那 that is 省略掉 used for everyday purposes， 它用于日常的 purposes 用途或者目的，也就是日常使用的，就是这个古埃及世俗体。While 另外一方面对比呢 hieroglyphics 就是古埃及的象形文字呢，它们是一种 symbols， 它都是一些符号，跟中国的象形文字其实很像，概念是一样的。那这些符号呢 that were mainly used by 主要是由谁使用呢？由 priests 就是祭司，他们要干嘛呢？ document 他们要记载， document 通常是指详细的记载，他们要记载重要的宗教还有历史上的活动 events 或者事件，他们要记载，所以这是用于正式记载的一种文字，叫做古埃及象形文字。
I want to quick say something that some of my students seem to have not learned elsewhere, so maybe this is helpful to other people too. Generally, in an English passage, in an English article, when we put in a word that we suspect most people don't understand, we will usually immediately define it after the comma. And a lot of my students, they will stop at the comma and be like, I don't understand this word. I'm like, keep reading. The next section tells you. So if you don't understand a word, keep reading, and it's very likely to be defined for you. And if then it isn't, by the time you've got to the end of the sentence, then go back and look it up. But maybe, the sentence is actually going to tell you the thing. You don't have to stop right away.
好，那在英文的文章里面呢，有的时候他用了一些比较难的字，或者他认为这个字可能一般的读者不懂的话，那他通常接着就会解释哈，可能就下一句就会解释哈，甚至于可能当场就一个同位语插进去。所以我们在阅读英文的时候，如果看到一个你不认识的一个，尤其是名词性质的东西啊，不一定是名词啊，所有的字都一样。你看到一个字，这个字好像不太容易认得，那说不定底下就有解释，所以最好就是你再继续往下看个几句哈。如果看完了他还是没解释，那个时候再想办法看是要查还是要怎么样。
Yeah, but basically read to the end of the paragraph and see if it isn't explained in some way afterward.
Yeah, 通常就读到那个段落的结尾，因为他通常不会在另外一段来解释，他要解释在就同一段啊，所以你读到结尾，如果发现他还是没解释，那你再想办法看怎么样处理这个字。
Our shows are a kind of Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, we're using the same technique. We're using one language to explain another language.
Yeah, 所以我们这个节目也有点像罗塞塔石碑哈，就我们 用不同的语言讲是同一件事情。
Some researcher thousands of years in the future is going to find our shows and be like, okay, so when Angela says da-da-da, then Wesley says da-da-da. So this word must mean this word or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Anyways, the Rosetta Stone, we're on the second paragraph now. The Rosetta Stone dates back to 196 BC. If something dates back to something, it's like you can trace it back to this date. We can use a specific date, or we can just say it dates back to the 1800s, for instance.
好，所以 dates back to 就是可以追溯到啊，那你可以用一个很明确的时间啊，也可以用一个比较大概的时间。那在这里是一个明确的时间，就是它这个时代可以追溯到西元前196年。
It contains 3 versions of the same text, and version is
版本。
So this text is really, nobody pays attention to stuff like this in the real world. It's a royal decree ordered by the Council of Priests for Ptolemy V. When you see P and T together in a sentence in English, it's just, you don't have to say the pt. Although as a kid, I loved saying Ptolemy because it sounds stupid. Just say Ptolemy, okay? And this dude, this boy, had recently become Pharaoh of Egypt. He'd become the ruler of Egypt at the tender age of 13. And so this was like, dun, 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 new emperor.
好，所以呢，它 contains 包含了 3 versions 3个版本 of the same text， 同样一段文字的3个版本。那 which 就是指它里面写的是什么呢？是一个 a royal decree， 一个皇家的法令。decree 就是一个法令，正式的这个法令。那这个是 ordered by 是谁下令要写的呢？是或者这个法令谁颁的呢？是 a council of priests， 是一个委员会，是祭司的委员会。council 就是委员会。那写关于什么呢？关于这个 Ptolemy， 或者也有人念 Ptolemy， 这个 the fifth， 他是托勒密五世。那这个人呢，他 recently 刚刚最近才怎么样呢？变成了 Pharaoh， 就是法老王。这个不要念法老啊，这是因为中文叫法老，很多人叫法老，其实是 Pharaoh 哈，所以是埃及的法老王。那 at the tender age of tender 在这里是 young and vulnerable 啊，所以通常讲 of tender age 常常放在一起用。所以 at the tender age of 13 就是他仅仅13岁，还这么小，他就成了法老王了。
Simply put, the text states that the priests of Egypt supported the Pharaoh and declared him to be a devout and generous ruler. Even though the dude is 13, we think he's great.
Yeah, simply put, 就简单的说，这个 text states that 就他陈述埃及的祭司们 supported 他们支持这位法老王，然后呢 declared him to be 就宣布他是怎么样。宣布他是一个 devout 就是很虔诚的，而且是个 generous 很大方的很慷慨的一个统治者 ruler.
Because you can't just say there's a new king, you have to say something nice about them afterwards.
Yeah, 好，你不能说我们有个新国王了，你一定要把他这个稍微赞扬他一下。
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was the history bit, and then the earlier history bit, and then what happened is after the rule of the pharaohs in Egypt ended in 30 BC, what happened was the Rosetta Stone became lost to history. That's a nice way of saying it, that it got dumped somewhere and covered with sand. Nobody cared about this old stone with some writing on it. There's tons of old stones with writing on it all over everywhere. And they're like, yeah, just one more, who cares?
好，所以呢，当这个法老王统治埃及在纪元前30年结束的时候呢，这一块石头呢 became lost.The history 就是从历史中消失了，这个 to 是表示一个关系的意思，所以就跟历史上面的关系就消失了，也就是从历史中消失了。
And it wasn't until July 1799 that it was uncovered or discovered by the French army during Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign. A campaign, when you're talking about wars, is like you send a bunch of people to do a thing. So his armies were sent to Egypt to achieve something, I don't remember. And so these soldiers were there and, doing what soldiers do when they're not fighting, which is just messing around with things. And they were like, oh, hey, look at this giant stone. This is cool.
好，这 campaign 就是一种军事行动啊，有的时候是指一场一场的战役啊，在这里就是一个军事行动。所以 it was not until 什么时候 that 就是一直要到这个时候才怎么样，才说 it was uncovered 这个石碑呢才被发现被发掘出来，是由法国的军队发掘出来的。那这个是当拿破仑在这个埃及啊，在那里采取军事行动的时候呢，他们发现了这个石碑。
And because there was a huge trade in antiquities in Europe at this time, the soldiers knew, oh, this is worth money.
当时在欧洲有大量的古董交易啊，所以这军人一看，这个东西应该很值钱哦。
And so they went to the trouble of carrying it all the way back to Europe. It was a giant stone. That was not easy. And so the stone was named the Rosetta Stone because it was found in a city called Rosetta, which lies about 65 kilometers northeast of Alexandria, which is the capital of Egypt at the time.
好，所以 was named 它被命名为这个石头被命名为罗塞塔石碑，那因为它是在一个城市称为罗塞塔的城市里面找到的。那罗塞塔这个城市呢 lies 就是位于 lies about 大约位于呢这个亚历山大港东北差不多65公里的地方。
So since the three scripts are of identical meaning, they have the exact same meaning, so the stone suddenly became a key to unveiling or unlocking or figuring out the mysterious Egyptian writing systems.
好 identical 就是完全相同的，所以因为这三种版本的文字呢，它们其实意义完全相同，所以这块石碑就变成了 a key to 就是一个钥匙或者一个关键，它就可以解开 unveiling 就是解开或者揭露这个非常神秘的埃及的 writing systems 他们的书写系统，所以它成为解开这个书写系统意义的一个很重要的关键。
And so between 1822 and 1824, this French linguist, a guy who studies languages, and his name was Jean-François Champollion, he was like, oh, hey, this stone is really interesting. He studied it, and he discovered through the stone that Egyptian hieroglyphics were not just images. They weren't just pictures that meant something, that carried meaning, but they were also symbols representing specific sounds. It was actually phonetic as well as symbolic.
好，所以呢，在1822年跟1824年之间呢，法国的一个语言学家香波利翁呢，他 studied the stone， 他研究这一块石头，而且发现说，这个埃及的象形文字呢，它不仅仅是 images， 就是一些图像 carrying meaning， 不是说只有一些有意义的图像而已，它也是 symbols， 它也是一些符号，这些符号是 representing 代表了 specific sounds， 符号代表了一些声音。
So this discovery enabled Champollion to develop a complete phonetic system for hieroglyphics. So he figured out basically how to read hieroglyphics out loud. And this provided future researchers, people who came after him, with the tools to unlock this ancient script. So if you want to learn to read hieroglyphics, you can go look up this dude's phonetic system and be like, yeah, you can go to Egypt and just start reading the temples out loud.
Yeah.
That would be cool, right?
Yeah, 所以这一个发现呢 enabled 就是使得这个香波利翁得以 to 干嘛呢？ to 表示得以的意思，得以发展出一个 complete 完整的 phonetic system， 一个语音系统。谁的语音系统呢？象形文字的语音系统。那这个语音系统 provided 它提供了未来的研究者 provide somebody with something， 就提供某人某件东西，所以他们提供了未来的研究人员呢一个 tools 一些工具，这工具可以 unlock 可以这个揭开或者是揭露它这个古老的这种 script 这种书写系统。
So the Rosetta Stone is now stored in the British Museum in London, and you can go see it.
好，所以呢，现在这个石头放在这个伦敦的 The British Museum 里面。
If you are ever interested in solving the riddle of ancient Egyptian scripts, the historic slab is well worth a view.
好，所以如果你对于想要解开古埃及的 scripts， 其实是文字，它是一种书写系统，那其实也就是一种文字。你要解开这个古埃及书写文字的这个谜的话呢，那这一块具有历史性的，尤其是有重大意义的这个石块呢，这个石碑呢 is well worth a view， 就是很值得你一看。好，各位可以把它背起来 Something is well worth a view
Or well worth a look
或者 well worth a look 也可以。
Okay, so what did you learn? We have 2 questions here for you to answer. And the first one is, what does the text on the Rosetta Stone mean?
好，所以这个罗塞塔石碑上面的文字是什么意思呢？
What's it actually writing? It says, the priests of Egypt supported the pharaoh, or Ptolemy V, and declared him to be a devout and generous ruler.
好，它上面写的就是埃及的祭司呢支持新的国王，而且呢宣布他是一个很虔诚，而且是一个很大方、很慷慨的统治者。
And then what did Jean-François Champollion find out about Egyptian hieroglyphics?
好，那这位法国的语言学家，他发现了关于埃及象形文字的什么事情呢？
he learned that they were not just images carrying meaning, but also symbols representing specific sounds.
那他发现了这些古埃及的象形文字不只是有意义的一些图像，而且它们也是一种语音系统，也有语音的意思。
So, that's all we have for you on the Rosetta Stone, but if you're interested, you should definitely go research more because it's a cool story and an interesting stone, although it's very boring to look at, gonna warn you. I thought it would be so cool looking. It's literally just a broken piece of stone with writing on it. But the meaning is priceless. Okay, so see you guys next time. Until then, bye-bye.